What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to another weekly news video. We're going to talk about a few things today. We'll touch on PSA twice. One, with regard to that story from a week ago regarding card cleaning as a service. I want to talk about that because I've not touched on it yet. And then I want to talk about something from Nat Turner on Twitter that I think is very poor form and unacceptable in my opinion. It's really amateur, if I'm being perfectly honest with you. We'll then talk about my fake Messi autograph video from a few days ago, because you've had another athlete or a athlete come forward and almost joke perhaps that their autograph is fake, that is sitting on a card. And I want to talk about it because I think it's a stark reminder for why we need to be very careful where we're spending our money, because just because these businesses are certifying these autographs, it does not mean they are genuine. And we obviously need to be very careful, therefore, where we're spending our money. So stay tuned for that. And then we'll talk about some hobby beef with some influencers that I think is pretty interesting, and Sports Card Radio tie into that. I just want to share my thoughts on that situation. Now, we'll kick things off with this quick story over here that somebody literally just shared with me before I went ahead and recorded this news video. And it does relate to Nat Turner, that I think is doing something pretty amateur hour here. Now, you had this individual GM on Twitter, This Is GM is their handle, and they asked Nat the question, "Hey Nat, could you help us make you richer by accepting tag slabs at the PSA vault?" Nat replied and said, "Have you tried sending them to the vault yet?" And then it looks like he immediately replied and said, "Hey, maybe try that first and then re-ask your question," implying that they are going to take them as submissions. You then had Hobby Champs, who does, a lot of commentary on Twitter, reply and say that this post cost him money. He sent a tag card to PSA vault and it's now being sent back to him. The original poster replied and said, "Yeah, same here. The same thing happened." And then you had Ryan from Sports Card Radio reply with an LOL, because I think this is, pretty laughable, if I'm being perfectly honest with you, because you've basically got, the CEO of the parent company of PSA saying, "Go ahead, try this, try and submit it." And then next minute, they're rejecting it and they've taken, the money for the submission, or this guy's just simply lost out for the postage fees, which I think is, not a good look. And you might sit there and say, well, what's the big deal? Maybe Nat thought it would happen and then it didn't, or Nat was aware that it should happen and then the people at PSA didn't facilitate it. But that's not, good enough. I would have thought in a situation like this, if you're going ahead and saying something like this, you could quickly write an email and say, "Hey guys, I've just told someone that maybe we should start accepting tag submissions. Let's start accepting tag submissions." Or better yet, if you're going to go ahead on a whim and say something, remember that you are the CEO of this business. And if you're not going to take them, maybe don't tell customers on the internet that they can go ahead and submit them. I just think this is, amateur hour stuff. And it's not a big problem in the grand scheme of things. Like, obviously people have lost money, which is completely unacceptable. But this just goes to sort of some of the amateurish nature of this hobby, right? You've got businesses just doing dumb things that shouldn't be happening. Like, I like the fact that Nat talks a lot on social media. He's really easy to communicate with. He's actually helped me with some problems in the past with my own submissions. But stuff like this, you expect to be done a little bit better and have a bit more professionalism. And sure, you might say again, maybe they should be taking tag submissions and this person got screwed over because the person processing it didn't do the thing they were meant to. But that's still, not okay. And stuff like this, really shouldn't be happening. I just think it's, pretty silly. So I want to hear what you guys have to say down in the comments below on this one. It's not a big problem. I just thought this was, very, very amateur hour. And I think it just speaks to bigger problems that happen in this space, right? This kind of basic thing that goes wrong speaks to the bigger problems that you also see happening, at least in my opinion. Now, what I mentioned in the intro about me wanting to talk about something that happened a week ago, it is the whole PSA card cleaning situation. Now, if you guys will recall, I've done a heck of a lot of videos on the whole Kurt's card care and the whole cleaning problem that happens within this industry. And I've called out PSA so many times, and I sort of gave them a pat on the back for actually banning Kurt and sort of holding card cleaners accountable. For the most part, they've made some mistakes when it comes to that. But when I was talking about those things, I also mentioned that it wouldn't surprise me if some time down the line, PSA started accepting cleaning as a service. And like what we saw a week ago, you had a survey go around that sort of said, well, what would you be willing to do if we offered them as a service? And they talked about card cleaning specifically in that survey. And what they mentioned in that survey was they're going to potentially facilitate cleaning, light buffing services, removing fingerprints, smudges, dust, and reduce minor surface scratches prior to grading, i.e. exactly the thing they've said is banned and exactly the thing that goes against their current T's and C's. And obviously this was incredibly laughable to sort of see. Now, I know businesses put out surveys all the time, so it makes sense for them to be testing the market, but it was pretty hilarious here to sort of see them come out with something that goes against their current T's and C's and something they've been so publicly against, especially in recent months. It just made no sense to me, and it made no sense to a lot of people. There was a lot of pushback. People put out videos about it, and then subsequently you had their, chairman, I believe it is, or the PSA president, I should say, come out and say that the wording in the survey would be corrected. It was subsequently corrected to remove, the fact that weren't going to use juice or wax, and they weren't going to do it to remove scratches or simply to remove fingerprints, as it does say over here, which makes a lot more sense. But it's just, again, very amateur to come out with a survey that completely goes against what their T's and C's are all about and completely against the sort of position they took or have taken over the last year to 24 months. I know cleaning has been against their T's and C's for a long time, but what I meant by that statement is they've come out and updated their T's and C's, which we've talked about, time and time again. As I've said before, it was never really going to be a surprise for PSA to come out and offer a cleaning service, especially since they entered the comic book grading market, considering CGC do that, and it's a huge leg up for them as a business. I don't agree with it, but it's something that brings them a lot more revenue. So the line of thinking was that PSA would naturally copy what they did for comic books because they want to remain competitive, and that then would slowly transition to sports cards and cards in general, which again, I don't agree with, but it's just a thought that I had and that others have shared as well. But to sort of see them come out with the survey and then be so brazen with the things they were suggesting they could do is very interesting. And obviously their position is to gather information as a business through surveys, but it's just wild to me. And I don't envisage them going down this path. I think it'll land where Ryan came out and said is that they're going to only simply remove fingerprints or smudges, which, to be very honest with you, this is something that my understanding is they're already doing. I know SGC already do this, right? Their SGC Pete, their CEO, has gone on the record and talked about that, I think in an interview with Jeff Wilson like 3 years ago. So, the fact that they're already doing that and now they're trying to talk about this as being groundbreaking, I think is a bit interesting. Let's sort of watch this space. But again, I think it's pretty amateur. And I want to know, your thoughts down below. What I thought was very interesting actually was the fact that the fitted sleeves are going to be charged $2 per card. That's something they were asking customers about. Again, the next interesting thing here is the whole graders note situation and charging people for that. CGC Comics, I'm fairly certain, used to charge for that. I'm like 99.9% certain it's free now. But back in the day, they used to charge for it and people didn't really use it unless they were buying a book. I like it from that perspective, but I don't think you should be charging. Just make it available. If you have the notes on hand, there's no reason why you should be charging people to go ahead and see it, right? You should already be documenting these graders notes as part of your grading process, or at least I think you should, because that would be what the efficient thing to do is. Now, the next story relates to this whole messy fake auto situation. I spoke about it the other day. I'm not going to repeat myself now. Go ahead and check out that video. But essentially, you have more and more cards from Topps with messy autographs on them that PSA will not authenticate and PSA would not put in their slabs, raising serious questions around their authenticity. And what I talked about in this video and what I've talked about in every other video for the last 3 or 4 years explaining these fake autos is that these companies, don't always have, the best procedures around how they can make sure that these autographs are genuine. Because a lot of people sit back and think, well, Messi signed it. Surely somebody from Topps has sat there and watched him sign it. But that's not how it works, right? They can't fly people all around the world. It's not efficient. It's not practical. So what they go ahead and do is they get a third party or a family member of the athlete or the player's agent or, a contractor, and they get them to sign a contract saying, hey, you're going to cite these autographs. You're going to make sure that they're genuine. We're going to trust you with this, and you're going to be held liable if they turn out to be fake, right? This is common knowledge. Has been known in the hobby for that to happen for well over a decade. Now, what sort of happens as part of that is the person doing the job is maybe not getting paid very well, and they don't pay attention, and they've got no real skin in the game, so they don't really care. And sometimes athletes will get friends to sign for them, or they'll just get auto pens and the like, and things will slip through. That's why these mistakes happen. And that's why I keep talking about it, because it's something that needs to be more common knowledge. These cards on the back say they're certified, but that doesn't mean squat, right? And we've seen time and time again, businesses not willing to stand by the fact that they've certified those autographs. I've given examples like that in the past, but I'm rambling now. The reason why I want to talk about it is because of this post over here from Collect that I think was also posted by Neo Cards and Comics. I think he spoke about it in a video. I didn't watch his video, but I saw his Instagram reel about it. And somebody asked Frank Gore Jr., you can see there, the FGJ, whether or not this autograph was his, and he jokes and said it's fake, it wasn't his. Now, in this situation, who knows? He could be being genuine when he's joking and just taking the piss kind of thing. But, if it is his, this is not a new problem. And the reason I want to talk about it is for the same reasons I just sort of said over here. Like, guys, when you're going ahead and spending your money, don't trust these businesses. We've seen, a couple examples here of PSA in this particular video doing, amateur hour things, right? Things that you would not expect a business like that of that kind of value to be making. It's not out of the realm of possibility that you've got fake cards out there. It's not out of the realm of possibility that you've got fake patches in cards or non-game mode patches in cards. That's stuff that we sort of sit back and when we think logically, we understand that that's, a huge risk of happening, right? We sit there and say and joke about it, that it's happening, blah, blah, blah. But people are still going ahead and spending money hand over fist. And you can do what you want in this space, but my message to you is just be very careful. Approach collecting like I approach collecting. I've talked about this for freaking 5 years now. I don't spend a whole lot of money in this space out of my own pocket, right? I buy cards, I flip cards, I use those profits to buy cards for my PC because, number one, I don't like spending money on sports cards because I think it's an incredibly risky area. And whilst I have some valuable sports cards, I've done it that way because it protects me, right? Because if those cards end up being fake or they were graded poorly or they were trimmed or whatever, right, I'm protected because technically, yeah, I've paid the money to buy those cards, but when it comes to money out of my own pocket, I'm not going to be it's not going to cost me anything. I'm going to be a bit protected in that regard. And that gives me a bit more confidence to sort of participate in this hobby. And that's what I sort of encourage others to do when you've got mistakes like this happening, where you've got auto pen stories, fake autos. It's like, guys, you've got an instance where there's Lionel Messi autographs in Topps' highest end set, Topps Dynasty for soccer, that now have question marks around the authenticity of them, whether or not they're genuine, right? If that's happening on that scale, what do you think is happening on the lower end athlete side of things? You got to be very careful. That's why you need to be more wise with how you're spending your money. I'm not saying don't collect cards. I'm not saying avoid this hobby. I'm saying spend your money wisely. Don't spend what you shouldn't, or don't spend what you can risk losing. And in my mind, whenever I've bought money in cards, it's, already lost. It's similar to gambling, right? You go ahead at the casino, put $100 down, you should be expected to lose that money in the first place. And anything you get back is winning, right? So anyway, that's my train of thoughts on the situation. I probably rambled a heck of a lot there, so I do apologize. But hopefully you guys get the point.